you go from a guy who's absolutely enthusiastic about winning in sports in general to people who are uh, politically and economically driven for what they want and what their goals are. And that does not vibe well with the fan base, nor do I think it vibes well with cultivating a winning franchise, right? And that's what we had before all this.
Deep in the heart of Texas.
We're in the business of winning.
Don't bet against me.
I don't bet anyway.
Lose your life.
So, playoff start here in about an hour. Had some time to wallow and have my pity party about the Luka trade and all that. Some time to digest it. And so just thought I'd give my thoughts, right? It's probably be a long video, but kind of given my thoughts on the Sunday show before, and that might be about it. I haven't really made a video on it yet. But, I do typically like to let things simmer for a week or two before I try to arrive at a conclusion with anything. And it's been, a month or so now. So thought I would give my thoughts, right, as a genuine lifelong diehard Mavs fan. And so this is kind of where I want to start, right? Like, what does it feel like is kind of the question, my thoughts. And the only thing I can really compare it to or think of, first of all, let's do it properly. The only thing I can really compare it to for me personally, right? And I'm sure other people have gone through this. If you've ever gone to like a new school, if you ever had like a big move in your lifetime and you were essentially, elementary school, junior high, high school, that like sort of sinking feeling you get whenever you sort of realize you're going to move and like although like you might keep up with friends, you're not going to see them as much, and your teachers are going to change, your whole where you live is going to change, right? That's kind of what it feels like. And I'll sort of explain. So a lot of things have happened at once that have made this more than just a sort of star player being traded in a sort of head scratching move, right? It's much deeper than that. And want to give some background as to why that is, or why this is more than just highway robbery, right? It's almost treasonous in a way, not to be hyperbolic. But if you guys maybe go, slightly biased as another big Mavs fan account on YouTube, the last couple videos he's done, if you want to go watch those, are also a good insight into how we're feeling. So I want to start with this, right? To drive home the point of like where I'm coming from, and not, again, this is not a pity party or sentimental or whatever, but literally, my parents divorced when I was very young, and so my dad and they were in Dallas. My mom moved down to Houston, right? And although I mainly went to school in Houston, and I kind of consider Houston home, really. It's where my son is, right? It's where a lot of my family is. It is where I largely went to school, right? I went back and forth, if anyone's ever been, split parents or whatever, right? But, I'd go back and forth the weekends to my dad, and obviously me and my dad did a lot of sports stuff, and that's where my love of sports largely came from. A very similar story for a lot of guys. But for the Mavericks, right? Like, my dad obviously was a big basketball guy, and although I am probably built to play other sports, I also really loved basketball and played it my entire life. I loved everything about it, the game and everything. But These are like some cards. See if that'll zoom in properly. These are some cards my dad would sometimes. You can't tell it's a Dirk rookie base card. Here's a Topps Chrome one. Probably having the fade on or whatever is not helping. Is that better? There we go. Try that again. It's like a Topps Chrome, card. He would stick these in like my stocking, right? There's a really cool one. All rookie cards, and I have tons of other ones. I even have like some Samaki Walker ones. I think that he got me. If you remember Samaki Walker, the infamous draft pick right before Charles Barkley, I think it was, or something. Um, so like this is personal. Like the Mavs are personal, right? And if you go watch like my A&M and UT video I did not too long ago, I kind of the gist of the video is that, if you're an Aggie fan, it's because you're probably born into it, right? Or you have some really tight geographical, localized tie to A&M, right? And the same thing is sort of if you were a Mavericks fan during my age in the 90s, right? So I was born in 88, so I came up, as soon as I was 5 years old, I can remember playing basketball, right? And the Mavs sucked, and I knew they sucked. And me and my dad would go to Reunion Arena. That's the arena that they had before now. And at halftime, you could sneak down. I remember going and watching us lose to the Sacramento Kings at the time, who were like the other worst franchise, right? So like a lot of just memories that I was just born into being a Mavericks fan. There is no other team I'd root for. There's no reason to. Houston kind of is on the back burner a little bit, right? I like to kind of maybe pull for them when I can, but in terms of rooting, who I actively root for or would watch, right? I mean, it's Mavericks or nothing, right? And so that I think that's important, right? That there are literal memories tied with this team and me. Me and my dad, I've shown before. Me and my dad went to Game 3 of the 2011 NBA Finals, right? Which is still one of the coolest things I've ever done. I was there when Steve Nash put us away when he was with the Suns in Game 6, and he just rises up and hits a three over Jason Terry. I remember it very vividly. So I've just seen a lot of pain in my body to go see Michael Jordan's last game in Dallas, right? Just when it comes to sort of the Aggie and Maverick comparison, right? Like I am a Mavericks fan by blood. I like the Cowboys and the Stars and the Rangers, right? They're obviously my teams too, but in terms of sort of being what they would call diehard, it's the Mavericks and the Aggies for me, right? And the personal ties are why, right? So in comes Cuban, in comes Dirk. Um, we have the Nelson boys as well, Rick Carlisle, just like some good guys who are loyal and have built a franchise up. And just within this past year, right? The first sort of domino to fall, or let's go back a little bit more too, right? Nico Harrison comes in the mix, essentially replaces the Nelsons. He's more of an analytical guy. He's more of a networking guy, and there was a big kind of rub there with Nelson and Carlisle and the sort of struggle for power and final say with Luka. A lot of people don't remember, but like Carlisle and Luka used to butt heads a little bit. And a lot of that I don't think is from Carlisle per se, although Carlisle has a little reputation of maybe being a little demanding, a little bit of a complex system. You have to be sort of a big brain basketball guy, I think, to truly flourish in his system. And 2011 proves it, right? Very old veteran team, guys who around the league were known as smart, high IQ basketball guys, right? And you saw what they were able to do under Carlisle's system there. But so a lot of people don't remember there was a little bit of a struggle there with Luka and Carlisle as well. Very short lived. You didn't really see a lot of it, but it was there. And so Carlisle goes, the Nelsons go, right? And they kind of essentially just a difference in interest and perspective, and they were gone, right? And that was a big move for the Mavs and for those of my age who knew nothing but sort of the Nelsons, right? Even Don Nelson, who coached us, who sort of really brought the Mavericks with Dirk and Finley and Nash, and really brought those guys. Really kind of, I don't want to say Nelson put us on the map, but Nelson was one of the masterminds that got Dirk here. Sort of put that team together with Nash and Finley and those guys. And so obviously you got to hit Dirk first. I mean, you got to have a star player, but Nelson is the guy who saw the potential, right? I mean, he's the one who saw the potential and believed in him. And so to see them go and that sort of changing of the guard was a big culture shock, right? It was a big change in terms of the face of the franchise. Cuban is still there, so in Cuban we trust. It is his team. And for everything that people want to say about Cuban, you know, I would rather have an egomaniac who loves sports, who wants to do nothing but win, right? And is willing to lay it all out on the line. Whether people don't like maybe he's too hands-on for them or whatever you want to call it, his antics, right? But there's nothing worse than I remember the exact opposite or the doppelganger of the Mavs might have been the Clippers, right? Remember for a while they had a nice young up and coming team, but their owner would never sign anybody to big contracts. He wouldn't take a risk on a guy. Uh, and I always told myself I would always much rather have Cuban over. I can't remember the guy's name. Sterling? Was it Sterling? Something like that. The guy who was in that big the big controversy. But I think it was the same owner at the time too. But I just said I would never want that, right? That is the worst case scenario when you just have a owner who's there to collect the profit from the TV contracts and whatnot. And even if he's not putting butts in the seat, he's making money. So there's really no incentive to try. That is the worst place to be, right? So, you know, I was thankful for Cuban that what he had done, and I'd rather him be too involved but really competitive than to not be that competitive and not be involved, right? So there's that. And he had come up with the Nelsons and delivered us our championship, gave us Dirk and all the memories. And so when Nico came in, I mean that was the first domino to fall in a way. It's hard to I say that now, but Nico came in and made a splash. Nico came in and won me over immediately. Um, I've mentioned it before that Dallas had never really been a big free agent destination. We have hit on some draft picks. We've signed some good vets at times, but man, we just could never sort of get that guy or two. The whole DeAndre Jordan fiasco. We just could never land a guy to come to off a free agent that would sort of give us that really peak like 5 year window or something, right? With Dirk, your floor is always high. And we saw you do have a puncher's chance at getting a championship, which you proved in 2011, right? But we just never were a free agent destination. So Nico comes in. Nico's from Nike. Nico gets Kyrie here. Nico makes that trade for Grant Williams. Immediately doubles down and hits on Paul. Hits on PJ Washington. I'm sorry. Hits on PJ Washington, right? So even when the Grant Williams thing didn't quite work out, he totally redeems himself. Moves a few picks around on draft day. Gets lively. Gets rid of Bertans' contract. And I mean, within 2 years, Nico has totally restructured this team and for the in the best ways, contract wise. The way he was sort of it just felt like, and this is the key phrase here is asset management. Felt like we finally had a guy in here who was making the right moves, was a step ahead, um, was a big network guy, which Dallas, again, as I said, desperately needed to get Dallas to be a little more enticing for people to come here. He proves it with Kyrie. Whether you say we got Kyrie because of his antics to or whatever. It doesn't matter. He gets them right, and we go to the Western Conference Finals last year. I mean, to the NBA Finals last year, and like the the feelings and the vibes could not be any higher, right? I mean, from as much as we love Dirk, Luka was just on a path, even up till right now. You could say like he is on a absolutely ridiculous trajectory, right? I understand he hasn't got any of the big hardware yet, but you can't really think of a better guy to roll the dice on, right? Or if you had to have a guy lead you into battle, I mean, there's not many better than Luka right now, right? And for the past, 4 or 5 years. Again, I understand he hasn't gotten it done, but with Dirk, right? As we can see, right, the narrative can change real quick, and Luka's probably, I think, got a better chance to win one before Dirk did in his career, right? At this pace, right? So, you know, the vibes could not have been any higher after last year. I understand it ended on a bad note. Uh, but again, I mean, you have total faith that Nico can get this done. And then Mark Cuban gives up his majority stake in the team, right? And um, this is honestly, I was not as worried as I should have been. I thought, okay, we are set up so good right now, and as long as Nico is kind of the one still calling the shots, or is it kind of the guy who is saying this is what we should do, and he gets the backing of ownership to be a GM and do what GMs do, and not sort of be a Jerry Jones type owner that wants to be too hands on. One thing about Cuban, he might have an input, but I think he did a good job of when it came down to it, right? He let the guys who knew what they were doing make the call, right? Um, and so the alarm bells, although there was maybe one faintly going off in the distance, I was not that worried, and I should have been more worried, right? So, and the reason why I'm making this video today is Nico had this press conference, apparently just media only behind closed doors, and I think it's some kind of front lash, you know, about the Luka trade, trying to get the talking points squared away, making sure everyone's on the same page. If you're not on the same page, then I'm sure you might say your access has been revoked or something like that. I don't know. But I'm sure it was something about when the season comes to an end and when this Luka thing comes up and all kinds of things, here's what we're all rolling with, right? Let's make sure we put out a galvanized front um, as a franchise in the media, something like that, right? That's what I think. First of all, horrible decision to do it the day of or the day before the play-in of your team, right? Literally season on the line here, the next couple of days, and like you do this. It's just, anyways. Let me unwind here. So, anyways, so Mark Cuban leaves, right? And at that moment, again, I should have been more concerned, but we have Nico, right? And Nico we trust. I literally was saying up until the time Luka got traded. I mean, and this is the baffling part to me. And I can point nowhere else. People want to know my opinion. I can point nowhere else but ownership with the Adelsons. And going back to how be careful what you wish for in terms of, I always really appreciated Cuban. And, as much as like maybe I wish he'd be quiet about certain things politically or whatever, right? As we all do with anyone. I loved having him as an owner. There was a while back where I thought he should have bought the Rangers too. But maybe it was the Rangers or the Cubs. I think it might have been both actually. He made a run at buying. And there could have been nothing better for baseball than to let Mark Cuban be ownership in a team, right? Like baseball, I think desperately needs new blood at the top in a way. I think Cuban would have been a good choice, especially here at the Rangers, right? I think he really could have done some stuff, especially with no salary cap, right? I mean, who better do you want as an owner than Mark Cuban with no salary cap? And so, you know, Cuban is a tech guy. He is a mogul guy. He is a sports guy. He loves sports. He's always been a big sports fan, right? And that's why I said we could do much worse for an enthusiastic hobbyist for a billionaire, right, to own a sports team, but an enthusiastic hobbyist who loves the competition and sports and things of that nature, and is who's all in, right? That's a good way of putting it. Cuban is all in when he does something like, especially like owning a franchise, right? Which is why I wanted him so bad for the Rangers. I think that might have been like 5, 10 years ago. I can't quite remember. I think a lot of Nolan Ryan with a lot of other partners, I think might have kept him out or something. I can't quite remember, but anyways, he didn't get part ownership as the end of the story. But the Adelsons are purely political, and again, I this is where the sinking feeling comes in. Getting back to the beginning of the video, for anyone who's ever like moved schools, that's just the best analogy I can come up with, right? Because I don't want to relate it to maybe something more personal or tragic, right? Where like maybe you had someone close to you really hurt. It's not that it's the end of the world, right? We're talking sports here, right? And so as a kid, right, you think you understand it's not the end of the world, but that it sucks, and you are now this sort of faceless, nameless person at this new school, and you have to do this whole thing over again with making friends, putting up with bullies or people picking on you. Just having to do the whole gauntlet again of, finding your spot in a school, right? And that is what it feels like now. It feels like if I were to go to a Mavericks game in Dallas, I feel like I wouldn't know anyone there. It would feel totally foreign, and it would feel like this great thing that I had at this other school with my friends and this relationship and the good times we had and the role that we were on, doing whatever we were doing as friends and that camaraderie, right? It's now like just been ripped away, and it's hard, right? It really does suck, and it's hard. It's kind of funny when I say like it's hard, like it just sucks. It's really hard to put it other than that. And and so that's just the best way I can explain it is I understand that, Cuban won't be an owner forever. I understand that the Nelsons won't be GM and coach forever. I understand that, right? And I understand there's a changing of the guard at some point, but the way that this has so quickly transpired and the way that it's done, the way that it has unfolded, it's really head scratching. Just like for anyone who loves strategy games or negotiating sales calls, right? The way this has all gone down just makes no sense. It makes no sense, right? And that's that is that's the salt in the wound part, right? I mean, obviously the sinking feeling like I kind of described as switching schools, like that's really obvious. You can get that kind of from the outside looking in, or if you've ever been a diehard or of another team and this has happened, right? Like imagine being a Seattle Supersonics fan and they move and they leave, right? Like you can understand that, like that feeling of all these memories you've had with this team, or for the good or the bad, right? Like even when I live in Houston, I was a Dallas fan. We'd always talk trash, and like I'm not even in the mood to like talk trash anymore. It just sucks so bad. And so the Adelsons come in, and I think I have no other place to put my tinfoil cap than there. If being a conspiracy theorist again, one of the things that's so hard is that I know Nico is not dumb. I know Nico's not stupid. And in this press conference, one of the reasons I wanted to sort of make this video or inspired me is he keeps saying that this entire trade essentially boiled down to the fact that Anthony Davis is a better defender, right? I mean that largely. He said like defense wins championships over and over. He was saying, Anthony Davis gives us a better chance on the defensive end while still being a good offensive player, right? It's you could imply that, and that can all be fine, and I can almost buy into it. The value for Luka uh makes no sense to me, and I can't think of anything else other than ownership for whatever reason I think pulled the trigger on this, and I can't put it any other way. I really, I cannot, after seeing Nico do what he did with Grant Williams moving to get Derek Lively, double down on the Grant Williams trade to get PJ Washington, getting Kyrie here, getting off Bertans' contract. He has made too many good moves before this to make me think he thought this was a good deal. I remember I told you, or I said somehow in the Sunday show or something. When I heard that we traded Luka, a little piece of me was excited. I know that sounds really weird, right? 90% of me, right, was like, God, shit, right? Like it's hard to imagine that you got better. You obviously did not get another Luka in return, unless you traded for Wimby or something like that, right? Which just I knew that's not what happened, right? So I was like, it sucks, obviously, because I know whatever we did will not make us better now. But knowing Nico, as much faith as I had in Nico at that time, and seeing the moves he made, I thought to myself, let's see what we got. I was a little excited to see what we got in return. Well, I mean, that sounds weird, right? But I just want people to know how much faith I've had in Nico. That again, asset management is something uh Nico is not a rookie on. Nico knows what he's doing. I still believe that. Nico could not if Nico were to sit here right now and tell me that he thought that was the best value or deal that he could have gotten for Luka, or he really thinks that he got the most value in some way, I would call absolute bullshit on him for that. And if he really thinks he got fair value, then everything that he has done up to now makes no sense. It makes it almost seem like he was just throwing darts at a board and got lucky. And I refuse to believe that, right? And a guy who's at Nike, worked for Nike, knows all these guys, is very in tune with the culture per se. He knows that we all know that what he got back for Luka was highway robbery. It's right now we are looking down the barrel of the worst trade. Again, we don't know officially how it will play out, right? Luka could keel over tomorrow, and Anthony Davis could go on a 10-year LeBron James type enhanced run or something like that, right? We just don't know, right? But in my opinion, we are looking down the barrel of easily one of the top 5 worst trades in all of sports history. I think maybe someone needs to educate me on the worst trades of all time. But this one's got to be up there right now from what we're looking at. What Dallas has done since then, what Los Angeles has done since then, the way Luka's played, the way Davis again in and out of the lineup, right? Say what you want about Luka, right? He whines, he cries, he's out of shape. The dude wants to play. He's a gamer. You will literally have to cut off one of his legs for him not to go out there and compete and still drop a triple double, right? It's just it's absolutely ridiculous, right? It's nuts to I brought up the stat that technically at the time of the trade, Anthony Davis had played more games in the last 2 years than Luka, right? And that was a bit of a cope by me, I think, to say, well, maybe Davis is maybe gotten over the injury bug a little bit or something of that nature. And of course, like literally game one, he gets hurt. You could not have scripted it any better, right? So whichever basketball god thought that up, that was hilarious. Uh, but so that's the I cannot get around the value in which we got back for Luka, you know, and what Nico had done prior to that. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Nico knows he could have got, I honestly was thinking like we got a minimum of 5 or 6 first round picks, minimum, if not more, and we got maybe like 1 or 2 solid starters, like NBA worthy starters, and maybe like a role player or two, like a good rotational guy, something like that. I mean, I literally was thinking like, depending on what we did, this team in another year or two might be even better, right? Like that's honestly what I was thinking, and then just to see the value, that was honestly like when my heart that was when it slumped literally to ground zero, right? Like I couldn't I wasn't even mad. I was heartbroken, right? I literally felt like, I came home and my house had been looted and everything was on the floor and like family pictures were tossed about and my jewelry was missing. Like the feeling was just like I'd been violated as a Mavericks fan. Like that's what the feeling was like. Like treason at the beginning of the video is what I said. Again, I wasn't mad, but that's how I felt. Like I literally felt I had been betrayed. And I cannot, if I had to, if you're gonna metaphorically, twist my arm until I made a decision, for lack of a more graphic metaphor, I probably would say ownership had to be behind this, right? And the Adelsons are very much into the gambling and the casino business, and there's rumors of that essentially once it gets pushed through the legislation in the next year or two, that they'll be first in line and they'll have the having the Mavericks is essentially their way in of being legitimate to be one of the first people to get a license in Texas. For those of you who don't know, the Adelsons are very, very heavy into politics. Like we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars donated to the candidate of their choosing, right? A lot of people might consider them right wing, but in the past they've been very like left wing, right? They will donate their money where they think they can get the most juice for the squeeze, right? And I'm not necessarily hating on that per se. For anyone who's into politics, that just sadly is unfortunately how it works a lot of the time, both ways, all over, right? It's just people with money get the influence, right? That's just how it is. But one thing in their defense, I can't understand why they would do this. Again, I think this is the hardest part is there's just no good answer, right? There's like this scratch that I cannot itch with any kind of logic or reasoning. And it's like definitely a mood killer for watching basketball right now, no doubt. But it is so unexplainable. It's so mind-boggling. I'm flabbergasted, right? To just go on with adjectives. I just you know what I mean? It's like what are we doing here? And this is like the point of the video. I don't even know what to say really. Like that's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. Is like it doesn't even make sense, right? Like really, I'm in the conspiracy theory hours right now, peak conspiracy theory hours, trying to understand who, what, and why they did this, right? Because it is a little ironic that if you wanted to get gambling in Texas, trading Luka would be nothing more than some kind of power play in which you're trying to do one of two things. You're trying to flex that with the amount of influence and money you have, you can come in and do whatever you want. And or on the backside of that, the Mavericks become a shitty franchise again, and Dallas becomes desperate for some kind of new revenue stream or action or however you want to put it, to lure in money or business or what have you, however you want to frame that, right? Is that, well, if we tank the Mavericks, it will be either or both of two things, that we are showing what we can do, and that ruining the Mavericks will make the city of Dallas or Texas in general more desperate for casinos in a way. Again, that's kind of like a hard theory to square away, right? But I really can't. I can't. The only other explanation is that Nico literally thought this was a good trade. And again, even if I agree with him that yes, uh, you know, Luka on the defensive end is such a liability. We'll never beat the other best team in the league, right? We'll never finally get to the promised land because of Luka's defense. I don't believe that for a second, right? Uh, they said the same thing about Dirk. Steph Curry is not some kind of lockdown defender, right? There are so many countless examples of guys who are so heavily offensively minded and perhaps are not, who are below average or bad defenders, still being, again, the guy who stirs the drink on offense, and your team is still championship caliber worthy, right? And to think that you went to the NBA Finals with this guy. 2 years before that, he went to the Western Conference Finals with the fucking nobody cast, essentially. No offense to those guys, right? But what he did against the Suns was legendary, in my opinion, right? Some people might disagree, but him personally getting that team over that Suns team, in my opinion, was one of the best series by a player or a win that one of the best. I'm just going to say that. It was absolutely incredible. And that game 7 was total bliss. I remember I was working, I was traveling. I was in the hotel room. I literally had to rush to the hotel room to start watching the game. And the I literally had the neighbor come and knock on my door, and I told him, I was like, "No, I'm just a big Mavs fan." They were like, "Oh, okay, like I get it." Literally, I was screaming. I was so excited, dude. I was talking so much shit to the TV. It was total bliss, right? But to think that that guy uh is essentially worth like a first round. I mean, literally, you got a first round draft pick. Like, to think that Davis is going to put you over the top, in my opinion, is just a little. Again, none of this makes sense for the value that we got. But the other part that's really hard about this is, again, I talked about how it's been so hard to make Dallas a free agent destination place. And before Cuban left, everything was going right. You know what I mean? I mean, take away the finals loss, right? Again, you get to the finals and lose, you don't just tear it down, right? In my opinion, a lot of people, I think, more recently have had this mindset of you win or you don't, and if even if you got that close, it just means you still weren't good enough, right? Some people think that way. I somewhat understand, right? Like that, you go all in or go broke, right? In a way, I don't. I think that team is good. I thought, again, we have good young pieces. To think that with that team, Nico couldn't get another good free agent or something like that. I just don't believe that. And so, like, this is the part back to what I was saying earlier. Is like, if I went to a Mavericks game right now, I would feel foreign. I'd feel like it was my first Mavericks game, and this is where we're starting now going forward. And the thing is, like I was saying, everything was going right. I mean, I was so happy with what Nico had done the last couple of years, where we were headed, seemed like the team as itself like was good vibes, right? Like there was not really a lot of locker room controversy, if any, that I can remember or think of, right? You know, Kyrie seemed in a good place. Derek Lively, I thought, was in a good position to grow. Imagine having to see Kyrie and Luka coming at you every day in practice, right? We had the two big men. I mean, everything was just going right. You know, we're just making the right moves and hitting, and like literally all of it's gone in like 6 months. It's really a crazy timeline, and that's the worst part. Is like, where do we go from here? What is our face? Kyrie's hurt. You know, we in my opinion, I thought the Mavs were good enough to maybe finish top four, get a first round or a home court in the first round. They were definitely, I think, on the trajectory to do that. Seeing what the Lakers have done, you know, since Luka coming in, it definitely feels like the Mavs would have been top four and maybe that fifth seed, maybe the sixth seed or something. Very tight race, I understand. You know, and to be in the ninth spot, you know, or the 10th spot, you know, it's obviously this is not a championship caliber team right now. Like even if we somehow get out of the play in and miraculously win a first round or second round or whatever, right? Like this team's not going to win a championship. Where do we go from here, right? I mean, this is where now I'm where I start to get a little frustrated because we're back to that place of think about being Anthony Davis or Kyrie Irving or Derek Lively or anyone on this team or organization right now. What's the feeling with you right now? Can't be that positive, right? It's got to be this feeling of this could be blown up at any moment, or if I don't do this or that, or what constitutes me being a worthy player of this franchise anymore? Luka gets shipped out for a guy who's 5, 6 years older and a first round draft pick. That was our entire team, you know, metaphorically speaking, right? That was our motor, our engine, our that was what we operated from the axis of, and that got shipped out like that. The Mavs are not good enough right now. I mean, if everyone came back healthy 100%, we can have that conversation next year maybe. But again, Kyrie coming off an injury now, surgery. You know, Lively was hurt a little bit this year. Anthony Davis, you just never know. So this is not what our team is going to be like in the next year or two, right? This team is going to go through some drastic changes in the next year or two, I feel. Um, and the thing is, you know, who's going to want to play for us? This what we've done, in my opinion, I don't want to say it's toxic, right? That's like a word that's kind of overused, but uh, what's a good way to describe what I think it's like walking on eggshells, right? It's very tedious. You're constantly looking over your shoulder. You're probably self-censoring a little bit with you, not just your words, but your actions, and you're second guessing everything, right? It's just not a good place to be, right? And going back to the Adelsons and the Cuban thing, you know, you go from a guy who's absolutely enthusiastic about winning in sports in general to people who are uh, politically and economically driven for what they want and what their goals are. And that does not vibe well with the fan base, nor do I think it vibes well with cultivating a winning franchise, right? And that's what we had before all this. And now it feels like, you know, it feels like we hit that apex of the finals last year, and it's going to be downhill for a few years, and who knows when we'll get it back, right? So that's my video. That I know it's long. I'm just kind of rambling and venting, but just from a diehard Mavs fan, um, it sucks, man. Like this really sucks. Like what sucks is Whenever you were reprimanded or punished as a kid, for the most part, your parents or your teacher or whatever would tell you why, right? You would at least, even if you thought it was unfair, you would at least know why, right? They would at least say, hey, you were being too talkative in the back, or hey, you didn't do the chores I told you to, or whatever, right? And even if you thought, well, like, wow, getting grounded for the weekend, that seems a little dramatic, you then knew what the boundaries were and what we were operating with, right? And like with this, there's no good explanation that we've been given that is out there. Uh, and so you're left with this feeling again. It's like being ripped out of your school and going to a new school. I feel like the franchise has been ripped from the fans and is now in the hands of people with different motivations and intentions than Mark Cuban. That's probably the best way to put it. And Cuban was very in touch with the fans. Cuban loved the fans. Cuban did it for the fans. Cuban famously, he said, when the Mavs start doing better, I will not raise ticket prices. He held to that standard. I don't know how long he did it. Obviously, at some point, probably were raised, but he held to that promise for the most part. He is very much a sports guy, right? That's what he bought the Mavs for. Call it a hobby, right? Call it a billionaire enthusiast. He loves sports. He likes sports. Big Cubs fan from what I know, right? So like he is a sports guy, and we now and with that feeling of being a sports guy, fans can relate to, and we can understand, and we can when Cuban talks to us or tells us something, even if we disagree or we see differently, again, we can largely understand and be like, okay, I can see where he's coming from, or I can see the goal, I can see the picture, I can see the larger picture, if you will. And now it's going to be nothing but moves made in the interest of things other than the fans and sports, and again cultivating a winning franchise. And that's what sucks. That's the hole that's being left that will not be filled anytime soon. That's what sucks. So that's my video. I'm gonna leave it on that. I think that's a good ending. You guys let me know what you think. I'm sure tons of you guys have opinions about the Luka trade by now, but I wanted to let it simmer and sit for a little bit. I wanted to chew on it. I wanted to wallow in the sulk, Uh, maybe things changed, right? Maybe something else happens or what have you. Again, that was me maybe hoping too much, holding out hope. Uh, but now that we see where we're at, playoffs are starting. We see where we are, right? And that those are my thoughts. So I'll see you guys on the next one.